Welcome to Living a Triggered Life podcast with Keith
and Roxann, presented by The Triggered Project.
Find out more information about The Triggered Project, go to www.triggered1.com.
What's going on, Roxann? How are you?
I'm good, yo. Coming off of a long, sad weekend.
Sad? What? Why? What had happened? Why is it sad?
I work in a hospital, and unbeknownst to me, when I said I wanted to work in a hospital, I never really thought through how much grief, death, and dying there is. So, is that?
Yeah, that's.
Am I making myself clear?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and it is.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, I understand. I mean, can you talk a little bit? You can talk a little bit more about that.
About what I'm dealing with?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So usually when I'm in the hospital on the weekends, we cover the whole hospital. So we get tasked to see all kinds of families. And then specifically in the ICU units, our task as social workers is to emotionally support the families when they have a loved one that's critically ill. So usually I cover maternity, which is cool.
Right.
Because it's all about life. But every now and then, somebody else covers maternity to give me a break, and I end up covering the rest of the hospital. And sometimes if there's a lot of people who are critically ill, a lot of family members need support, emotional support, because they're grieving what happened to their loved one.
Right.
Somehow, it just kind of happened. You never know what is going to happen this weekend. And as we all know, in the summertime, there's a lot that goes on in our communities of violence. But this weekend, there were multiple people who were critically ill, and their family members needed support. And sometimes one of the things that I do, which sort of gets me wrapped into being a part of being there for the family, is when we have someone who is critically ill and they're unable to communicate. And sometimes we don't know who they are. And sometimes we do because they have identification on them, but we don't know. They're not somebody that we know that comes to this particular facility for care. So we don't know how to contact their loved ones. So this particular weekend, I ended up having to dig and be an investigator to find loved ones. And once you do that and you make a connection and you find loved ones, you're their person. You can't leave them. You can't be like, oh, I'm done. Good luck. So I became their person for the weekend. And then there were other people that were there that were coming in. Because, the weekends is when people can come and visit their loved ones.
Right.
So then I ended up getting wrapped up in multiple critically ill people. At least, I think it was like 4, 5 families. So once you become the person, the initiator, they need that connection in order to sort of get their needs met and feel cared for. So I feel I'm pretty depleted today.
You feel like you're on E in some ways?
No, I don't. No, I don't feel like I'm on E, because as I experience this more, I recognize how to sort of keep a safe distance emotionally.
Right. No, which is incredibly important. Do you notice that you never ask me how I am doing? I only ask you how you're doing for the most part. The people that have been listening for a little while.
It's not on purpose.
I'm just saying.
It's terrible. Thank you for telling me. That's terrible that I don't ask you how you're doing.
But sometimes that's how things work. You know what I mean? Like, I can ask you a million questions about a lot of different things, and you don't ask me things. It's always like, it's kind of weird to me.
Sometimes I do.
Right. No, I shouldn't say, all the time.
You're making it sound like never.
No.
But you're right. You definitely ask more questions of me and our relationship in general than I ask you.
Yeah. And I think, and I ask questions because I think it's incredibly important to do that. Because people change, situation changes, you evolve as a person, and I don't always take it for granted that you're going to think about a situation or someone or a topic one certain way. You know what I mean? Like,
I feel like though sometimes we've gotten in the place of that we just automatically check in, and when something is really bothering us or something happened or we saw somebody that we haven't seen for a while reconnected with someone, we sort of automatically tell each other.
Yeah, we do automatically talk and stuff, just naturally. That's just, we're kind of gossip with each other in that way, which is really nice. But yeah, I just feel like sometimes you just don't ask me stuff. I
don't think that's true. I think you miss the moments when I do it.
Oh, okay.
I am not as regular as you are. I will definitely admit that. I'm not as regular as you are. I do tend to get very caught up in my head. And I'm a thinker and I'm a problem solver and I'm a doer. And I find that I'm constantly doing that in my head. I'm constantly having internal conversation like all the time. And I wonder if it has something to do with how we're different as trauma survivors.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it may have something to do with it, but can I get up in there a little bit? I'm just saying in that process, like, can I get a little?
But you're talking about it like I never ask, and that is so far from the truth. I do ask. I mean, but it's
just an example.
As much as
we've been doing the podcast for a little bit now.
Well, the podcast is different.
No, but still,
the podcast is different. Let me tell you why.
You still don't ask me. You still don't ask me how I'm doing.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but it is different because I find myself like. To me, this is revealing of oneself
no question.
In a way that I'm not accustomed to. Mm-hmm. And
well, you don't think that you're accustomed to. This is who you are. Like if people sat and people see us and talk to us and whatever, you are no different. You are as brilliant as you are. Opinionated.
But those are intimate moments. Keith. This is not an intimate moment. These are never intimate moments. This is like being on stage.
Yeah, no, not at all. I don't think so.
No, I'm saying, no, I know you don't think so. No. Because you have a whole career of on stage.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, but that's right. And you may feel like that, but you're being completely 100% vulnerable in a way where, it is kind of, I guess you're thinking about it in terms of you being involved, but there's no like character or nothing. Like this is who you are. This is you.
But I leave here sometimes after we've had conversation. I leave here wondering to myself if I revealed too much and if I'm actually okay with what I revealed. Mm-hmm. And because it's a very different process for me, mm-hmm. I actually sometimes am like, oh, next time I'm just going to be more closed off. I'm not going to reveal as much about myself because I'm feeling this way, this mm-hmm. or that way. So this is like, I'm very self-aware in this podcast. Mm-hmm. Of how vulnerable I am. And although I am comfortable with vulnerability, mm-hmm. I'm a people person and I connect to people and I'm not connecting to our audience. I'm connected to you and we're having conversations and I'm revealing myself mm-hmm. and it feels uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I get caught up in my head and don't even recognize that I'm not asking you how you're doing. And I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable even just with this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's getting you out of your head, pretty much. I think that's become a safe space for you, is just to be in your head. And
oh my God, are you kidding? That was that's a lifeline, being in my head.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I think you're probably more in your head than you probably have ever been before. You know what I mean?
Well, my trauma socialized this behavior. You know that, right?
Yes.
Oh, you're making a face, so.
Yeah, but I feel like you're making choices more to be more in your head than you've been before, or maybe because you're doing a different side of the work that you're doing. Maybe that it's dictated you to be a little more in your head. But I feel like you're more in your head than you've ever been before. Yeah, I said it.
You did say it.
Yeah, and like I said, I feel like it's a choice. I don't feel like it's something that just happens. I feel like it's a choice. It's something that has happened, and that's something that you just continue. You know what I mean? Because if I tell you about it, we talk about it, and whatever, then you're completely out and aware completely. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I think that it's been a coping mechanism for a long time.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, I think ever since you went to school to get your second master's MSW from Simmons 4.0, that I feel like you've been more in your head, and it's been, kind of a harder transition in terms of coming out of school, which because it opens you up in such a different way for you to kind of leave that, what helped you get through that, and kind of leave that a little bit and navigate a little differently through the daily battle.
Well, I will respectfully disagree. I don't think it has anything to do with school or my experience at school.
Okay. I mean, that's all good. There's no problems, one way or another, whether you agree or disagree. You know what I mean? It's just what I see.
Do you want to know what I think?
What I see.
Well, I hear what you see, but do you want to know what I think?
I'm never going to say no.
You can.
This is part of what we do. I ask you what,
Yeah, but I thought, well, I thought we were talking about something different today, but that's okay. We can go this route.
No.
I'm good with a left turn instead of a right turn.
No. I mean, we're talking about, I asked you how you were, and so we're having this discussion and things like that. We can segue into.
We don't have to. I'm just noting.
Okay. Noted. Noted.
So wait a minute. You just blew up my spot. And now you're acting. Now you're like, oh, it's noted.
I didn't blow up your spot.
You did blow up my spot.
How'd I blow up your spot?
You just told everybody that I never asked you how you're doing, which is not the whole truth, but I understand where you're coming from.
No, I didn't blow up your spot. You don't think the people haven't noticed? The people that have listened, I don't know.
I don't know if they noticed or not. I'm not noticing.
No, of course not, because you're in your head. That's why.
All right.
You know what I mean? Like you
consider that blowing up my spot. No,
that's not blowing up your spot.
All right, stating the obvious. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you name it whatever you want to name it. I feel I'm on the hot seat right now. That's how I feel.
I don't think you're on the hot seat at all. I mean, we're just saying what it is. You know what I mean? It's not like there's necessarily like I'm not like having like full judgment about it or anything like that. I'm just saying
that doesn't mean anybody else is not having full judgment about it.
I mean, really, like you're really worrying about it now. What is that? Like.
I'm just saying. Like, I'm engaged in the conversation. That's all I'm doing.
Like, who cares about judgment and whatever? If we cared about that, we wouldn't be doing this. You know what I'm saying? Twitter is probably going to be going crazy.
I still care about judgment. No. I absolutely do. Now, does it completely distract my whole being? No. I care about judgment.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that.
Well, let's just clarify something. It's not about school. It's not about the transition of school. I graduated in 2015, It's almost 4 years. It's not that. It is the constant, and I think people will understand me when I explain it this way. At least I hope. Maybe you will too. It's more about imposter syndrome, which I've been talking a lot about lately. Mm-hmm. And imposter syndrome is that feeling of not belonging, being caught up in your head, not sure if you're good enough, if you're doing good work. That has plagued me my entire life because I grew up with such a highly critical parent that I still haven't sort of figured that part out about myself. So when I'm doing this work that I'm doing, I'm in territory. I don't know how to help. This is my other me talking. I don't know how to help people who just got bad news about their loved one. I don't know how to do that. I know how to be present. I know how to work within the moment, but I don't truly believe I know how to do that. I just know how to be human in the moment and be as authentic as I can be. But I often walk away from the work that I do, even the students that I see in therapy, wondering, am I really helping you? Can I really help you? Do I really have anything to offer? Did I offer something? Did I make that session about you, about me instead of you? Was I respectful? Like, I walk away with a lot of questions, and it's just a process. And sometimes that's where I'm at in my head. Am I really good enough? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's something as survivors, that we definitely go through. I definitely go through that. You know what I mean? Like I was saying before in one of our podcasts and stuff, and I think it's important for us just in general to try to ground ourselves before we're going into situations. You know what I mean? I go through my process is one that's been changing and things like that, but understanding what my purpose is, understanding, who am I serving, so to speak, and how do I know? What are the indicators to know that I'm doing a good job on stage, or am I doing a good job mentoring other survivors, or just having a good conversation, with another brother who I see in the street and we start talking about manhood or whatever? How do I know? You know what I mean? And I think being present in the moment is more than most people are able to do. And I think that's what makes you good at what you do, because you are present. You know what I mean? And more of us, that's one of the harder things to have to do, I think, even as survivors and whatever, is to just be present. And just for folks who are dealing with anxiety and just in general, the hardest thing to do is to be present, right? But I know when I can look in somebody's eye and look in somebody's face and whatever, that will tell me, okay, all right, they're taking what I'm saying and that, okay, I did all right. You know what I mean? Like that, I can have a conversation with someone, I'm looking at someone in their eye and being present, and I can tell by their energy that whatever I've said has been helpful. And I'm like, okay, like I got to be okay with that. You know what I mean? I have to go, when I put out my energy and whatever, I put it out there, and it's kind of going to be what it is in a lot of ways.
But that's what you're talking about, is you just being a human being in the world. And I think that what I'm talking about is being a human being in a system.
No, but I understand what the system is. The system is of whether you are trying to help people within your job and everything else. But I mean, what are your constituents, right?
You said what?
What are your constituents? Who are the people that? How do you know whether or not you're doing a great job or whatever? Like, how do you know? How do you know?
But it's
right, because if you question yourself,
I think it's a different.
How do you know?
How do I know?
How do you know?
I have moments that I hold on to when I know.
I mean, you have more indicators of telling you the positivity and that, yes, you're doing everything that you need to do. Even when you tell me a story about what happens during your day and things that the people say to you and how they act, their body language and everything else. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know, whether or not you can actually hold on to that. Right. And sometimes that's difficult for all of us to be able to hold on to that. But you have a lot of indicators. People give you a lot of indicators about how they feel about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And sometimes you're just not going to know either. Sometimes you're just not going to know.
No, I know I'm not going to know. But, no, I don't really know what to say. I hear what you're saying. I think that I've spent a lot of time learning how to be a therapist and a social worker. And in the same token that there's a lot of indicators that I'm having some sort of positive impact on people because I'm a very individual kind of person. Mm-hmm. I haven't sort of morphed into this being marching and rallies and advocacy and all that. I haven't quite sort of morphed into that fully, but I have also had a lot of negative indicators. And when you are accustomed to paying attention to the negative indicators your entire life and it's part of your formative years, it's a task to not stay there.
Right. There's definitely and I think it takes practice. You know what I mean? It takes practice for us the tapes are always going to play, right? The tapes are always
I'm not even talking about the tapes. The tapes is a whole nother... Yeah. A whole different floor than what I'm talking about. But yeah.
It's just, as a black man walking down the streets and all the indicators that happen when people feel like they need to clutch their bag or need to be aware of me and stuff like that, even though there's someone else who's not of color who's standing behind them with a knife, right, about to stab them. They're still going to look at me, you know what I'm saying? And I'm in a suit and tie carrying a Coach bag. You know what I'm saying? Like in terms of those things, those strong indicators, that we deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, but because you're a black man is a little bit more obvious, and me being a light-skinned female, it's a little bit more covert.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is about talking about the negative energy or the negative messages, right? In formative years and things like that. And so I was trying to make a kind of analogy or not necessarily a comparison, but understanding exactly what you're talking about in terms of the negativity and how it's hard to be able to see some of the positive stuff because, you've been fed all this negativity for so long. And so I think it's because there is so much positive that's going on around. There's so much positive that happens within your work with your colleagues that talk about you and the students and stuff like that. There's just so much stuff there. And I think it takes practice to try to see those things, but also understanding that it's not about a system, right? We're trying to think about in your context of the work that you do in a bigger context. That makes it really difficult. You're about the one-on-one. You're about the environment that you're working in and making those connections. That's how you do your work. That's how you make a difference.
But that doesn't cut it.
Cut it for who? That doesn't cut it for you?
In general, it doesn't cut it. Because I can't resolve a lot of the issues that I'm talking about with folks. It doesn't cut it to just do the individual when the system just keeps banging people in the head.
Right. Well, then, the thing about...
Because then what are we doing? It's a hamster wheel.
You can do what you can do in terms of it, right? You understand what the situation is. It's the same thing when you're working for the state. That's a different beast altogether, and you found your way to try to navigate it, right?
Not without a lot of scars.
Right.
And wounds.
But I'm just saying, if you're always thinking about that big level,
But that's part of social work, dude.
Okay.
It's a part. And if I don't think about it, it becomes a hamster wheel. And you get closer to burnout when you feel like, man, I'm just talking to one student of color after another, after another, after another, and how the system that they're in and that we're both in just continues to pound us with the institutionalized structural racism and how that plays a role on what our families have done to us and the messaging or from society. Like, it's not enough. And we learn that. That's part of our training. We learn that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a micro and there's a macro, and there's a few other levels to it. You have to pay attention to all the levels.
Yeah, I think it's important to pay. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of your training and stuff. I think that's well stated. But I think sometimes that we can start looking at hanging on the big picture so much that we're not seeing the difference that we're making at a smaller level.
We're just not going to agree, yo. Well, we're just not going to agree, and that's okay. We're not here to agree all the time.
No, not at all.
I don't think we're going to agree on this.
But if we're always thinking about but if we get caught up too much in the big picture, then how can we feel positive? That's what I'm saying. How can we feel positive?
Because you have to work at it in different ways, which is what I thought we were going to talk about today, is how you work at that. Like, you have to look at all these different levels, because all these different levels is what's impacting why people go to therapy. It cannot just be the individual, because the individual is not just causing what's happening in their life.
Right. Well, think about what we're doing right now as we're dealing with, we're dealing with individual folks. We're doing this podcast, dealing with male survivors and everything else that we're doing. So we're doing some individual stuff, and then we're taking it bigger, right? That's what we're doing. But we're starting with the individual, and I think that's important.
Again, we're not going to agree. I don't agree. I don't think that's what we're doing.
Okay.
I think when you start out with the individual story, and then you create this awareness sort of campaign, and then you add communities of the mental health system community to it, and then you're adding community people who are out there hurting, and now a podcast. That's not starting with the individual. It's not like just that simple. This whole Triggered project that we've been talking about is hitting every single level that I'm talking about, and maybe I need to share what those levels are with you so that you can understand what I mean. And that's how we get trained to do our work. We cannot do it otherwise. You can't do this work otherwise.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Roxann. You've been listening to Living a Triggered Life. My name is Keith Maskell.
Roxann Maskell.
And we're going to continue next time with the topic that we were going to get in today. And I'm glad that we talked about this, to talk about what we talked about today, because this is like a precursor to that topic. What's that topic, Roxann?
We were going to talk a little bit about how we manage listening to stories of trauma all the time. That's what we're going to talk about.
That's what we're going to rock with next time.
Thank you for listening to Living a Triggered Life podcast with Keith
and Roxann, presented by The Triggered Project.
To find out more information about The Triggered Project, go to www.triggered1.com. And remember, you're no longer surviving, you're thriving, and you learn that.